Hello and welcome to another model making session, and by way of a bit of light relief, after hacking balsa for the last week or so and having the house in turmoil, I thought I'd do something a little bit more laid back, a little bit more relaxed, and that is I'm going to paint this figure up. I picked him up at a swap meet for I think £1. I thought he could come in useful, and what I'm going to do is try and breathe a little bit of life into him. It's a pretty dead figure, the minimum of painting on it. He's had his arms hacked off at some stage. I've just patched them up with a bit of balsa and filler. So what I'm going to do is try and bring him to life and make him look a little bit more presentable. He's going to go into the cirrus moth. He's going to be the instructor. Whether he has a trainee, I don't know, but I'm going to paint him up. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray him all over in a matte grey, just to get rid of the shiny plastic and give me something to start working on. So strap in, get your favourite tipple to hand, a little bit of relaxation, and I'll talk you through how I'm going to paint this figure up and the sort of philosophy behind doing it. Stay tuned. So here's Bert. He's had a spray coat of grey primer just to give something for the paint to get a tooth onto. I'm going to do a very simple approach to painting a figure up, and I hope by doing so I can illustrate that you don't need to go over the top or be a great artist to produce a nice finish. I'm going to basically approach it by using 3 tonal values: a dark tone, a mid-tone and a light tone, to produce to show out the recesses and the highlights. And by doing so, I think we'll get a real 3D pop to this figure. Something that only, I think it costs us £1 at a swap meet. So here we go. Let's get cracking. Well, what am I going to use? I'm going to use a variety of paints. This just happens to be my box full of Vallejos, but if I don't find what I'm looking for, I will use some enamel paints as well. I'm going to mix and match. So let's get started. I think we'll start with the jacket. Yeah, let's start with the jacket because that's the simplest way to show you how I'm going to use tonal values. We're going to go for a brown leather jacket, well-worn leather jacket, and I'm going to use 3 different shades of brown to give some pop to it so that you can see how it's going to work. Let's get started then. Right, I'm just about ready to start here. I have some shades of brown, dark shade, light shade and yellow. I'm going to have to mix the colours that I desire because I don't have everything to hand. So this colour that I'm putting onto this plate here is actually rust, but that'll do fine. And I have a dark grey here that I can mix in with the rust to produce a darker shade. And I've got a yellow that I can mix in to lighten things up. So I'm going to try and take this yellow down a notch. Sorry, not the yellow, the brown. I'm going to try and darken it down just a little bit more. And I'm going to give way too much black there. I'm going to give the whole of the tunic of his flying suit a coat. So let's get going. So there's a base brown on. Okay, now while it's still wet, these are all water based by the way. While it's still wet, I'm sure I'm getting enough light on this. While it's still wet, what I'm going to do is mix some black in with the brown and just go in to the recesses because that's where you would have shadows naturally. And at this stage I'm sort of exaggerating it a little, because I'm going to blend this in later on. So all I'm doing is putting a crease of a darker colour wherever you would have a shadow, to wherever there's one material meets another, wherever there's a crease, I'm adding a darker shade, and that will help bring out a 3D effect on the jacket. You have to exaggerate scale, I believe, because if you don't, it doesn't show up at all. I had the same philosophy when it came to colour as well. Colours are never as the same. I haven't actually seen many people weather down aircraft, I suppose because they're not dirty and scruffy like a boat is or a locomotive is. They're not, it's not a thing, is it? They tend to be a lot cleaner. But colours aren't always what they seem, and people get rather carried away with scale and colour, when the reality is if you get far enough away from something, it just looks grey anyway. I'm sure any of you who fly will know, no matter how lovely the scheme is that you've done, as soon as it gets up there, it becomes a grey silhouette and the colour scheme becomes almost academic. Unless you have beautiful weather conditions, in which case you're lucky you. So I've put some darker, let's see if that's showing up. Some darker tones in there, in the creases. And I'm going to blend them a little bit now with the original base colour. See if we're still... with the original base colour, so that that dark edge is less harsh. But still remains. If you really want to get into this, you get a much better effect, by the way, by using oils, because oils allow you to blend far more than acrylics do. The big advantage of acrylics is that they dry quickly. It's also the big disadvantage of acrylics, because that rapid drying makes blending a lot more difficult to do. It's not by accident that acrylics became the medium of the pop art era, the 60s, where you wanted brash, bright, artificial almost looking colours. Hold my breath here. You can tell when you concentrate and you're holding your breath. A little bit darker. I'm just seeing where I can add a little bit of, while it's still wet, you can blend this in. When you blend it, all you do is you take the paint off the brush and then brush it over the two colours that you've just added. Right, let's see if I can get you a little bit closer to this so you can see it. Bear with me. So you can see I've added shadow in, and then I've blended the colours while they're still wet. Struggling to keep focus here as I'm turning it round. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same base brown but add some yellow to it to lighten it right down. I'm going to pause it here till we get set up again. So that's the base colour. It's a bit polluted now. I'm going to add some yellow to it to lighten it up. Notice I didn't say adding white. White you can add, but it sort of kills colour quite a bit. So I've got a much lighter shade there now. It's a little bit more. And I'm going to add that to the high points on the tunic. So on the shoulders here, across the top of the collar, yeah. Notice I'm just splodging it on at the moment. I'm not making any attempt to blend it. What I'm trying to do is add beads of light where the light would be. On the upper surface. Yeah. Here. Now that looks pretty grim at the minute, but what I'm going to do is take some paint off the brush. Take most of the paint off the brush. Might actually use a feather it in like this. It's too much. And remove some of the paint. I'm going round, removing some of it. And while it's still wet, I'll blend in some of the mid-tone. So if we go back to the mid-tone, I'll blend some of that in. You have to exaggerate quite a bit to get the desired effect. And by varying, it's only 3 colours I'm mixing up here, or 3 tonal values, I think is the best way to describe it. By mixing this up, it gives a lot more pop to the appearance of the jacket. I hope you can see that. Let's see. So, okay, that's the first part. I'll leave that to start to dry off a little because you can see the sheen on it. I'm going to use what's called a dry brush technique on the collar. Gets a little bit messy this, but it looks really effective. I've got grey primer and I'm going to use that for the dark tone. And then I'm going to put a cream colour onto the brush. And then I'm going to take most of it off by wiping it on a tissue. And then very lightly, just dab over the top. To highlight the fur effect. Now it's only the smallest amount of paint that's coming off the brush. If you put too much on, it doesn't work. And you can see, I hope, that's just by brushing the brush very lightly over the surface to achieve the look that we're looking for. Now, all this strapping's going to get some attention, but because there's got to be lots of paint slopped about on it, it's going to be done last. I'm tempted to do the face dry brush using exactly the same technique. Let's give it a go, see what it comes out like. Just dry brush the face, and I'm not worried about hitting the helmet and etc. It's about building up layers, this. So there's the first layer, and straight away, although the face is very pale looking, I think you can see that you can start to see the features a lot more because I've highlighted these areas. Now I'm just going to touch that on there to exaggerate it a little bit, and the cheek, and this cheek. Added the lighter colour on, and now I'm just going to dry brush it. There's virtually no paint on the brush at all now. And I think what I'll do is I'll come in and blend that in a moment, but you can see there's some depth to the face. Let's address the helmet now. You can see the face there, that's with a couple of layers of dry brushing added. There's more to do. I'm going to add some colour to the helmet now, and I've just picked out a shade of a leather shade. I'm going to paint the whole thing so we'll let that dry, and then once that's dried we'll pick out some of the other detail. And when I say I'm going to do the strapping in black, I'm going to highlight that in shades of blue. But let this dry first. Can't resist putting a little highlight in the top there later. When it dries, hopefully it'll blend in. Leave that to dry. Bit more of a pop. And it's showing up much better. I hope you can see that that's starting to show up much better now. And that's simply by taking advantage, not painting the solid in, just dry brushing it in. I think the face is coming to life as well, a little bit at least. We can get better than that. Now, I'm quite liking the goggles as they are with that grey colour to them, because we want them to stand out as different. But what I can do is add I mean everything's shining at the minute because it's wet, but it will dry matte. But what I can do is glaze it with a varnish so that it shines reflectively. Now I'm going to use some oily steel to highlight the edge of the goggles. It's chopping. Wait a moment, let's get them sorted. There you go. And I hope you can see now, he's starting to get a lot more about him. Still wet, obviously, his helmet's very wet. There's a lot more going on there now. And I think you'll agree, I hope you'll agree, it's a big improvement. Here's the figure just about done now. I don't know how much I've captured on the video footage. His face is a bit pallid, but then again he's a pilot and he's scared senseless on his flight up there. I'm going to add some ink to run into the crevices. We'll see how that goes. So I have a sort of browny ink here, and I'm just applying it on the jacket, and hopefully it's going to highlight some of the detail. In fact, I'm going to add, this is a bit risky, let's give it a go. I'm going to add a little bit of black. Got to be careful with this because it's quite over the top. Let's take some off. I'm going to mix some of this black in with it. Well, I don't think that's worked actually. So what I'm going to do, blot this off before it becomes a major mistake. On the hat, at least, on the helmet. I'm going to let that dry, see what it looks like, see if I've killed it. May not have actually. Sometimes what happens is it doesn't flow properly on the surface, and if you add a little bit of IPA alcohol, it'll flow into all the crevices better. So that's what I think I'll do. So this time, let's try it with some isopropyl alcohol. Now it adheres to the surface. That's better. That's much better. Should have done that in the first place. Like that, I'm liking that. Well, there we go. I'm calling this chop done. For a little bit of effort. I hope it's transformed a very bland looking figure into one that will stand out in a model. You'll notice that the goggles are shining now, and that's because I've used some Clear Fix, which is a window making substance for model railways, etc. But any varnish would do to create that sheen, to give it a bit of a pop. I hope you've enjoyed that and it's inspired you to get a figure in your model. Please, please don't fly a model plane without some a pilot in it. But if you do, why not take a little bit of extra effort and spruce them up a bit, or her for that matter. So if you can get flying, do so. If you can't, then why not get creative and drag something out of the junk box to have a bit play with. Thanks for watching. Bye now.